You must tell me all your secrets. Remember, we must share everything together. Everything.
They come from the unknown, and they're here now, hiding, waiting to strike. You can feel their presence all around you. Never before have you come this close to the edge of terror. Never before have you faced anything so strange and sinister, so bizarre and unnerving. Never until now. David Cronenberg's The Brood.
Are you ready for me, Frank? I seem to be a very special person now. I'm in the middle of a strange adventure.
I want to go with you wherever you go.
Do you?
Yes.
And hello again. Welcome back to Girls, Guts, and Giallo. This is going to be an episode where I can't stop laughing because I am with my very good friend, Elizabeth Zito.
Hi, everyone. But you can call me Liz, actually.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Off to a good start.
So Liz and I are talking today about The Brood, the 1979 written and directed David Cronenberg film, The Brood. Liz, before we start talking about The Brood, who are you? What do you?
I don't know.
What
I don't
do you
even
do?
know how I got
Who are
here.
you? How did you get here?
I would describe myself as a multimedia artist and humorist living here in Brooklyn, New York. But we met in graduate school.
Cursed graduate program.
Cursed graduate school, getting our master's in video.
In bullshit.
In bullshit. But look where it got us, talking about The Brood here today. It's amazing.
Broadcasting from Liz Zito's Williamsburg kitchen.
Yes. But I am a huge horror enthusiast, and I use a lot of tropes in my own work, which Annie has also been in.
Yes, tell us about Wolf's Canyon.
Oh, okay. So Wolf's Canyon was my graduate thesis. It was basically like a 3-part web series about a girl named Courtney who was new in town in Wolf's Canyon, Oregon, when all types of haunted adventures happen. And I haven't talked about Wolf's Canyon in a really fucking long time.
I love Wolf's Canyon.
But anyway, so you know, is your basic like high school,
Just your basic
high school Buffy the Vampire Slayer era kind of inspired series, and Annie played my guidance counselor who guided me through an alien pregnancy.
I did, but I was secretly plotting against you.
Yeah.
Snyder.
Oh, yeah. Guidance counselor Snyder.
Don't you guys want to listen to all of our inside jokes? Isn't that super entertaining for you?
But you can check out Annie and Wolf's Canyon under the Wolf's Canyon tab on LizZito.com. If there's, that's really like the only reason to check out Wolf's Canyon is to see Annie perform as Principal Snyder.
It's Principal Snyder, which I'm pretty sure I stole from Buffy subconsciously when we did that. We were drinking quite heavily on that shoot, so anyway,
how
check
far
it
we've
out.
come.
Check it out. Yes. So that's how we know each other. And when you first came into our graduate program, I was like, who is this cool girl?
Yeah.
Because everybody sucked.
Yeah, just trauma sisters from the start.
Yeah.
I think we talked about how we never had no umbrella bitches.
Yeah. I wrote a poem about you called Two Broken Bitches.
We just like always show up like, never with an umbrella
Just
in the
disheveled.
rain. Disheveled.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it together.
And what a pair we made. Yeah. So, The Brood.
Right.
Why did we pick this movie? When did you first see The Brood? What did you think when you saw it? What did you feel?
I think I was introduced to Cronenberg with Videodrome, like a lot of people, and intrigued by that. And then just doing more research, I think watching The Brood was like probably like I felt like the most engaged in a film in a really long time. And I felt like 2 years ago, I had a birthday party where we watched The Brood and we painted our nails, which I believe you
I remember. I was there.
Because I felt like I really needed to share The Brood with my personal brood of women.
Your broodlets.
My broodlets. And then
broodlets.
And then I feel like every time I forget about The Brood, and then I remember that it's a movie, and then I re-engage with it, and I feel like I learn something new every time. About like how you can hate women and to the levels you can take. There's so many ways
you can hate women.
Yeah, it's really astonishing.
Oh, yeah, well, maybe that should be like the overarching theme. The question that we address in this episode is: does this movie hate women?
Yeah.
Does David Cronenberg hate women? Oh, who cares? Does the movie hate women?
Yeah. Or
I just assume all men hate women.
Yeah. Or I was thinking the idea of like the she-devil, like the woman is the devil.
Oh, absolutely.
And the ultimate like evil boss.
Yes, we will talk about that. And I saw The Brood on my part in college because it was on 100 Scariest Movie Moments on Bravo. Do you remember that show? I've talked about it a bunch on the podcast. And it just looked terrifying. I watched it. I absolutely loved it. My friends hated me for making them watch it. And I just love this movie. I think it's, I'm going to say his best.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I don't know if that's contentious or not. I don't know what the consensus on Cronenberg's work is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like they're all his worst movie.
Yeah, like I'm a huge David Cronenberg fan. I'm a huge fan of his work. I don't know about him as a person.
Yes, I would say so too. Yeah, aesthetically, and like the way he tells the story, I find really engaging. Except I definitely don't watch any of his new stuff.
I don't even know what he's doing right now.
I don't know. Like Robert Pattinson was in something, and I was just like, no.
Maybe I'll check it out. I don't.
I found that intriguing.
I don't know.
Our
Pats is in a David Cronenberg movie. I'm kind of interested to know what that would be like.
Yeah, check it out. Let me know.
Yeah, it's like what? I'm so unprepared. I am usually, I feel like, super prepared for these episodes, but because I'm moving soon, I think I'm prepared for this because I've seen this movie a million times. I've read a lot of books that reference it, but in terms of actual factual background, I'm not as prepared as I usually am, just because I just haven't been. I mean, I do this, basically for free, except for my Patreon.
Well, it's like you can take a cue from Cronenberg and the fake science that he puts in his films, and this just could be like fake knowledge about Cronenberg.
Knowledge. Did you know?
He made that film on the moon.
So let's talk about a little bit of the making of The Brood, and then we'll get into the plot. So 1979, it's a Canadian film. What we learned from watching this like mini documentary about the making of The Brood was, at this time in the 70s, Canada was like a tax shelter. I didn't quite get what that old coot was saying in that documentary. It was very boring, but one of the producers was talking about how Canada was a tax shelter for people making movies. I don't know what he was getting at. He was very hard to understand.
So you can make like cheap movies in Canada, basically.
Okay, yeah. And then like when tax season comes around, you just hide out there making your movie and like you don't have to pay film tax or something.
Just like write it off.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, that was sort of maybe would have been more interesting if that guy wasn't talking about it.
Yeah.
Starring Oliver Reed, Samantha Eggar, and Art Hindle.
British actors.
Was Art Hindle a British actor? I thought he was American.
Oh yeah, he was probably American. Now that I think about it.
No, he's Canadian. America Light.
We've done no research.
No. We have. We watched a documentary about it. So
The Brood, starring Art Hindle. Okay. No.
Art Hindle is Canadian. Samantha Eggar and Oliver Reed are English. They actually grew up in the same town, which is got the most English name in the world that I don't remember. It was like West Buckinghamshire or something of that nature. It was conceived by Cronenberg after his very tumultuous divorce, which I did not know. He also said that this was like his version of Kramer versus Kramer.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So apparently he, right before the filming of this, he like had to rescue his daughter from a cult that his wife was a part of.
In California, yeah. So that's what inspired this lovely film.
I
mean, the hate is real. But it is really interesting. I knew that this film was about his divorce, but I didn't know that it was like there was this element of rescuing his daughter from a cult in California, which made me kind of also think about like, well, I mean, which we'll get to, like the demonization of the wife. But I mean, like, I was just like thinking about what it would be like to join a cult.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have to imagine at this time, just from what I know historically, like the 70s, right? You had a lot of cults coming out of that time, like post-60s, post-Manson family shit.
Right.
And probably a lot of cults using like psychology language because psychology was like on the rise since the end of the 50s. We get like AA, we get NA, we get like an actual understanding of mental illness, and probably there were a lot of groups using psychology as a way to control people, as there still are. But I would imagine at that time it was just a huge boom of all of that.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Right. But like not necessarily like any sympathy towards like the state of mind that somebody would be in to join a cult.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Like, why did David Cronenberg's wife join a cult?
Yeah. It's like why did she run away from him with his daughter?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's, you know.
Watch The Brood and find out.
Like, I want to know more about that story. By the way, whenever you hear like those shaking sounds, that is Liz's nightmare dog.
Yeah.
Cream Puff.
Yeah. She's the goblin.
Yeah. So she'll be around, you know, and you'll just deal with it because
you have no choice.
You have no choice.
Neither, as none of us do.
Yeah. What else about the production of The Brood? So Samantha Eggar, who plays Nola in the film and who is a huge part of the movie, actually only filmed for 4 days, all of her parts.
Yeah, impressive.
Yeah, there's a great score by Howard Shore. I love the music in this movie.
Mm-hmm. The music is great.
The music's really great. And Oliver Reed is a hunk of a man in this. And apparently Oliver Reed got into some shenanigans during the filming of this. Like, he bet somebody that he could walk from a hotel to a bar completely naked, and he got arrested. He was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So
he's like the drunk on set.
Yeah. So there was some tension there, but I think everybody loved him so much that they were
like some tomfoolery, just like a fun drunk.
Yeah, they're like, Oliver Reed.
Right?
You know him. Yeah. And there's great practical effects, which we can add some tidbits once we get into the plot, because we watch that doc, so we know.
Oh yeah, we're so informed here.
So informed, right? And that's The Brood. God damn it. I'm trying.
Anyway.
Is there anything else about the production that is interesting? That is what I gleaned from my research. Those were the most interesting things to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump. I mean, let's like talk.
Yeah, let's just
get into it, man.
The fucking meat and potatoes of this shit.
Yeah, because there's so much to talk about.
Yes. So I have my detailed notes up here. So we got this very horny opening, in my opinion, and psychotherapist Hal Raglan, yes, played by Oliver Reed, runs this institute called the Soma-Free Institute, where he performs a technique called psychoplasmics, encouraging patients with mental disturbances to let go of their suppressed emotions through physiological changes to their bodies.
Oh, yeah, this opening... This is like the daddy issues opening. Daddy issue. Well, so many daddy issues in this film too.
So many mommy and daddy issues in this film.
But there's this film. It opens up with a little bit of like role play.
Role play, yeah. Raglan is role playing to a group of viewers. This technique that he has, this psychoplasmic technique that he has, where he's embodying this patient Michael's abusive father. And he's berating him until he starts manifesting these psychoplasmic lesions all over his body.
Yes.
Like in front of everybody's face. So the first thing I thought of during this opening, on this watch, was the name of the institute, the Soma-Free Institute. Mm-hmm. And I thought that this must have something to do with somatics, like somatic therapy, which... full disclosure, I have not ever done somatic therapy.
I don't even know what it is. Can you tell me?
Yeah. So in my understanding from researching it and just having friends who have gone through it, you basically do a series of movements that are supposed to put you back in the mindset of your trauma so that you can work through it. So there's different techniques, and in some somatics, or I think you're releasing it with your body, because when, for example, the example I've read is when an animal gets traumatized, like almost killed by a predator. The animal like runs for miles and miles and miles and like works off the trauma, like just works through it in that moment. Whereas humans, when something traumatic happens to us, we kind of repress it,
right,
and like keep it in our bodies,
right.
So that's why a lot of the time people who have a lot of trauma, like your hosts,
yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah, like let's talk about trauma work, like let's relive those memories.
Let's do it, yeah. You keep the tension in your body. That's why, like, a lot of the time your jaw feels locked. Like, you just feel clenched. A lot of people say when they go through somatic therapy for the first time that they feel, like, released, like, finally relaxed. Like, the trauma has actually left their body in some way. So I am very interested in trying somatic therapy. I just never have.
Is it like hypnotic at all?
I don't think it's hypnotic. I think it's just you do a series of movements that somebody guides you through that are supposed to activate this response.
Yeah.
So, but I also thought about how cult-like that can get, right? Because we know from that residency we did. I'm not going to name her by name.
Oh, yeah, the residency. Yes, exactly.
That people can get very cult-like about that stuff.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there is some correlation there in the name of the Soma-Free Institute.
Oh, that's so interesting. And then and then the person who's like leading you through this therapy then becomes like
your guru.
God to you, and you
can't do it without them.
You can't do it without them.
Yeah. Yeah, like that video that the woman at the residency made us watch.
Yeah.
Is a form of somatics. Yeah. But that was a cult.
Yeah.
But
I just like getting in a room with people in general freaks me out. So like the idea of getting in a room and being touched and taken through some type of therapy, I feel like
it's hard.
That's hard for me.
Yeah.
But like, I am really interested in trauma work. I think we all, I mean, like to different levels go through that in our lives, and like re-engaging with those feelings and like learning how to embrace them and open up with them is like a really interesting and important part of working through mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm definitely interested in doing that work outside of in a safe environment.
Yeah. And so then it's like twisting back to like also like Cronenberg's probably like perception of like mental health and psychiatry and therapy, and like what he thinks about like that type of work. And yeah.
Right. Yeah, I wonder what this cult was that his wife was part of. I don't deny it's a cult. I just wonder what the nature of it was and if it had anything to do with somatics.
Yeah.
That's my feel like, that might be part of it. So the lesions on Michael, this patient, they break out like right before our eyes and get worse as he's moving through these hard feelings, where Hal Raglan is playing his father and he's like, I shouldn't even call you Michael. I should call you Michelle.
The things only a daddy would know.
Yeah. It's very horny.
It's so horny.
It's really kinky. The opening, like, very, very.
Get it, daddy?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite scenes in any film.
Yeah.
I think it's just great. Like, Oliver Reed's acting is incredible, as is Michael's, which, apologies, I don't know the actor's name.
Who cares?
Yes. So I love also in the beginning the aesthetic of the film, like very bland 70s beige that I just love. Like that is the whole movie.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things about this movie that I always remember is the color palette.
Yeah. And like the color palette and like the fashion choices and like the way that those two things tie into each other, like as you're watching the film.
It makes the moments of violence so much more shocking because everything is so bland and beige that like when there's this red violence, it's just like very
and
shocking.
There's like a starkness in his other films that he made around this time too. I think with that like kind of like this idea of like the scientific subject and like this the like interview and the performance and then the kind of like sterility.
Yeah, I mean you can sort of track Cronenberg's through all of his work what the aesthetic of science was during the decade that he's making the film in. Like,
it's true.
When we think of 70s scientific study, we think of these like bland beige buildings. Yeah. And then we kind of move into like in the 90s with Dead Ringers, if I'm getting that correctly, when the movie was released. We get into more of this like industrial cold kind of erotic thriller aesthetic that he goes for. Anyway, I really enjoy it.
And like the more recent stuff feels like really kind of cold and like computery,
yes.
Beep boop beep bop.
Yeah. Well, if you watch any sci-fi movies from this time, like 70s, early 80s, it's all got that kind of like bland beige aesthetic. Like I just watched this movie called Demon Seed. Have you seen that, Liz?
Oh my God,
I really wish you didn't have somewhere to go today so I could watch this movie with you, but it's so fucked up. Watch Demon Seed, everyone.
I'm trying to think of it as like something I've seen, but also like talking about like the colors. I like recently like decided to I was like filming something where I wanted fake blood, but I just used like red paint instead. And I feel like that's like a similar thing, like just to have that like bright color within like the bland.
Yeah, I love
it.
Like
make it pop.
Make it pop. Yeah. So we meet Frank, the husband of one of the patients, who was also one of the viewers in this audience. Frank's wife, Nola Carveth, is a severely disturbed woman who is one of Dr. Raglan's patients. Frank currently has custody over their daughter, Candace. And we get this scene where he is bathing her. and he sees these bruises and scratches on her body, which he assumes are from Nola because they were just at the Institute visiting her because the kid hasn't seen anyone else. So now we're cut back to Dr. Raglan, who's back at the Institute in his robe being a hunk. I just cannot emphasize how hunky Oliver Reed is in this movie.
I mean, just like come for Oliver Reed and like stay for
the legions.
Stay for the legions. Demon children.
And the rage babies. And his twink named Chris, his like twink assistant, informs him that Frank is there and wants a word with him. Okay, is Oliver Reed queer-coded in this movie? I feel like he's having an affair with the twink assistant.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there should be a spinoff.
Yeah. I just get this vibe.
Right?
That he's gay in the film.
Yeah. Like,
which, good. And that's all I gotta say about that.
It just like makes me more engaged.
Absolutely.
Knowing that there's this like underlying like love story happening
between him and Chris.
Yeah. And like we can never really access it, but we know it's there.
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah. What happens to Chris?
Nothing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's probably devastated.
He was devastated when it's true. That's all I kept thinking about was just like, who is Chris? He's just around. Always in his room, always in Oliver Reed's room. So Frank is there to tell Dr. Raglan that he intends to keep Candace from visiting Nola because he thinks Nola is hurting her. Dr. Raglan implores Frank to not stop visitations, but Frank basically tells him to fuck off and that he's going to anyway. So what do we learn about Raglan as a character in this scene? How do you feel about him?
I mean, I feel like this is the point where we like, I mean, he's like the boss, like he's the boss, he's the big boss daddy. I mean, what did we learn about him?
He's the big boss daddy. He is also he really thinks he's onto something here. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about is like, is Raglan a villain? Right? Because he's complicated as a character, and I think he really thinks that he's helping her in this scene.
Well, it's not even like it's about like his project,
yes,
which is this like plasmathetics,
psychoplasmic.
Psychoplasmic.
He's worried that she will, her progress will be hindered if she doesn't get to see her daughter.
So she's like his prized patient where like this process is like the most successful. He's seen the most success out of this patient, and like part of that success has to do with these interactions with the daughter who is coming in and staying at the hospital with the mother on the weekends. So I don't think that he really sees them as people as much as this is like at this point
his experiment.
Yeah.
And he's a father figure to all of these patients.
Right.
Like he really is Big Daddy Boss.
Big Daddy Boss.
He is, but he's very like soothing. He's not an angry man. He's ideal daddy, like taking care of you.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think, like, the patients, to one extent, like, know that there's some type of, like, power control, like, dynamic within the institute, but at the same time, they would never, it's, like, the culty, like, they would never want to leave or, like, not be involved in this, like, relationship with this person.
Yes. Yeah, so Frank, my note here says Frank visits his Jewish lawyer who tells him to make nice with Raglan because it could get ugly. I just had to crack up because the lawyer is just like, you gotta be a real mensch, Frank. It's like, okay.
That's when like
very pointed detail.
The Jewish filmmaker comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very funny. So Frank says he wants to dig up dirt on the Soma Free Institute so that Candace doesn't have to keep going back there. Frank picks Candy up from school, and we meet her hot 70s babe teacher.
Ooh, yeah.
She'll describe the teacher for us.
She probably has, like, I would say one of my top 5 ideal haircuts, which is kind of like, I would say it's like a really slick 70s mullet. It's like very kind of like pixie short, some like kind of like points at the ears, and then like this like beautiful like almost who's the mother from the Brady Bunch, but like so much better.
Yeah, very Mrs. Brady.
Mrs. Brady style.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like punk rock and badass, and you're like, where did this woman come from?
Yeah.
Like, you're immediately engaged.
She's got this hippie outfit on.
Yeah, long kind of like culottes maybe. With
She's got
some,
this like skirt with this batik print peasant blouse. Yeah, she's a babe.
You can like really get into like the fashion in this film, and like
it has
the
great
choices
fashion
that are made are like really spot on. And I think like adding to like the engagement with like the weirdness of it, like how do you take such like strange subject matter and keep people engaged in this way? And I think like having like a great 70s mullet is like
great 70s mullet.
Yeah,
great hair in this movie too.
Yeah,
everybody has really good hair. There's obvious sexual tension between Frank and the teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Frank brings Candy over to Nola's mother's house.
Right.
Whose name is Juliana, I want to say.
Sounds good.
It sounds good. And she's got the most mint green 70s living room ever.
Oh, my God, yes, in this house.
And she's got on this chunky jewelry.
Oh, yeah.
And she is crying to Frank about Nola, blaming her for everything, and that she doesn't remember the abuse that Nola accuses her of, basically.
Yeah.
So what are your impression of this sequence here? What do you think? Like, do you think this mother was an abuser? I feel like it's very ambiguous in the film.
It is ambiguous, but they do have her, like, they pour her, like, the most giant drink. Like, whenever she's drinking, she has, like, it's, like, very, like, extra, the amount of alcohol in that glass. So I think they are, like, implying that she's an alcoholic, which is, like, why she doesn't remember. But at the same time, the question is also, like, why is this woman taking care of the child? Like, why is this woman so, like, you kind of, in Nola's description of her, you don't imagine that she's still a part of their lives.
Yes.
As, like, much as she is, and the father too. So that was kind of a surprise to me, like, when watching the film, was like, oh, this character is, like, still very much, her mother is still very much a part of her life that was so abusive to her.
Well, yeah, and I also think part of why Nola is so mentally unwell is from having this woman still be in her life, so and around ingrained. and nobody really caring. Like, Frank as a character is also interesting in this too, because I find him to just be so emotionless, which I don't know if that is on purpose or not. I think it must be.
It must be in order to kind of like tap into all these different elements of the story that are going on and like be able to navigate that. But I was also thinking it's really interesting that like all of the characters that we've met are these all the characters are of women are mothers or like school teacher, which is like another very like motherly figure, which is like why he's, you know, attracted to her.
Yes.
It's like, ooh, a new mommy.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's got to get a new mommy because he can't raise that kid himself.
He's like immediately getting a new mother.
Yeah. And like we're kind of like rooting for it because she's got that great haircut.
Right. I like hate Frank, honestly.
I know. I'm just like, Frank, deal with your problems.
I know.
Like, stop trying to get like another woman in here to like clean up your mess.
He's always pawning Candy off on other women.
Yeah, just like spend time with Candy.
Well, that's the other thing about this film is like how I think the film does have a lot of misogynist messaging, but at the same time, I think it's very critical of the men in the film because Frank keeps pawning his kid off on all of these women. And I think that that's a huge part of the film. And when the violence happens, when he pawns his kid off on people and doesn't take responsibility for her. And also Hal is responsible for everything that happens really in
Yeah.
the film. So it's kind of this is kind of like what I was talking about when I did Antichrist.
Right.
There's an awareness of the misogyny.
Yeah.
That is strange.
Yeah.
It's like when a misogynist man makes a movie about being a misogynist.
Yeah.
Like in a self-aware kind of way.
I think that's important. I think that's probably why you can get through the misogyny. I think, like,
Yeah.
as a woman watching like all of these films and feeling these things, like there has to be something there that's like kind of some type of rectification. But yeah, the Frank, he's always like racing to like save the day at the end, much like you can see like Cronenberg like going to like,
but his attempts are futile.
Yeah, it's like it's, you know, instead of being there throughout this whole process, it's like, no, I'm gonna be like the savior at the end. Where Frank isn't spending all this time with Candy, he's pawning her off on other people, and then like then has to like go and rescue her multiple times.
Yes, absolutely.
Instead of just like keeping her by his side.
Yeah, instead of just taking care of his kid. So Frank leaves. He leaves Candy with the grandmother. And Hal, back at the Soma Free Institute, Hal and Nola are role-playing in what looks to be like a sweat lodge, as this whole institute does.
I know, like a sauna.
Yeah. Just lots of, I mean, that's another thing that's very, like, 70s cult psychology-ish.
Yeah.
Like, just going in the sweat lodge.
Yeah, a
sweating
lot
it
of
out.
wood paneling.
Yeah, exactly. And I just watched Scanners also, and the aesthetic of that movie is super similar to this one.
When was that made?
81, I want to say. So Hal role plays as Candy to get Nola to talk about the abuse that she's experienced from her mother. And he encourages Nola to feel rage and move through it. So we see what his sessions with Nola look like.
Finally.
They're such good actors.
Yeah.
Like Samantha Eggar and Oliver Reed make this movie.
Yeah.
Their characters are incredible. Just the way that they role play with each other. Like they have they have great chemistry.
Yeah.
In this film. That is like not sexual at all.
No, it's not.
Which is very rare for men and women to be on screen together and not be family members and not have some sort of like underlying sexual tension.
Well, she's probably got some like dirt on him from growing up in like Bumblefield Bluebell.
Buckinghamshire?
Buckinghamshire.
Well, the other thing too is like I was thinking about Oliver Reed's character as a queer character.
Yeah.
And I could be like super projecting, obviously.
I don't know. I think it's time. I think we've cracked the code here.
Yeah, and I feel like the tension between them is very interesting. Like their relationship, like it's a muse creator relationship. It's also like a father-daughter relationship, and it's also got like some element of sexuality to it, but not in the traditional sense.
Maybe it seems like in terms of like power dynamics, it does seem like there is like a mutual respect there.
Yes.
So that they're like and they are dressed kind of similarly.
Yes, they're constantly visually linked to each other in the film.
Right. And this sort of like angelic kind of moment where you can like take in these like medium shots. But yeah, I mean like I think that she's like definitely all in on this therapy.
Yeah. And meanwhile, back with Candace and Grandma.
Oh yeah.
Grandma's showing Candy a photo of Nola as a little girl in the hospital. She tells Candy that sometimes Nola would wake up in the morning and be covered in bumps and no doctor could figure it out.
Oh my God.
So this is where we start wondering, like, is this some psychoplasmic stuff, or was she being beaten as a child and the grandma is like gaslighting everyone and, you know, saying like, oh, she's just waking up with all these bumps.
Also, like who takes pictures of somebody in the hospital?
Yeah, that's really strange too.
I mean, like, I was like thinking about like, oh, like we framed this picture of your mother after she was beaten and like woke up in the hospital.
It's very strange. And the grandma's like smiling in the photo. And Nola's like in bed sick. It's so strange. It's very creepy. So something starts kicking through the window in the kitchen.
But you know what's also interesting about that is that now that I think about it, we've never seen her out of a hospital bed.
No.
The entire film.
Yeah, we
So
only
even
see
in
Nola
the
in an institute.
Yeah, so like even in the picture, she's like in a bed, institutionalized.
Yeah. So, okay, so something starts kicking through the window.
Oh, yeah.
And Grandma goes to the kitchen to investigate and is attacked violently and killed by this unseen creature in a red hoodie. It's like a very brutal murder. And Candy finds her grandma's body and sees the little creature in the hoodie who leaves these bloody hand marks on the stairs. Ha! So the other thing we found out, and I'm just going to look this up very quickly. Pause this.
And description-wise, the creature that does the murder is about the same size as Candy.
Yeah, and has
the
blonde
child.
hair like Candy.
And has blonde hair.
So something that we found out, which I had kind of suspected before rewatching this movie, is that the main creature, the main broodlet, is played by a little person, an actor named Felix Silla. And Felix, he has a background in the circus and Barnum and Bailey shows. He was a bareback rider and a trapeze artist and a tumbler. And he started doing film in like the early 60s. So I thought that was important to talk about because little people who have traditionally played roles like this are not given the credit and the respect that they deserve.
No. And like, what an impressive background to have. So shout out to Felix.
Yeah.
It's always a question when there's a murderous child, like, who will play the murderous child?
Yeah.
And like, I just feel like we should get other murderous children to play their own, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the way that they were talking about the casting of the brood creature in the documentary we watched was so like old school and not
Right.
politically correct in any way. They were like, yeah, it was from the old days when people used to hang out in a hotel. And it was just very like a bunch of old
Was it
coots
that
talking about it.
they had
Yeah.
like found him in a hotel? Like he was working in a hotel.
He was working in a hotel and like telling
Yeah.
people he was an actor and trying to get bit
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
how Felix came to be involved in this production.
Yeah. Which is just like, and then one of the things they kept reiterating in the documentary too is what a small production team that they had, where, you know, maybe like 7 or 8 people on set. And it's just like kind of interesting to think about like them going out into the streets to cast people to play these little broodies.
Yeah.
What city was this filmed in?
Good question.
Oh my God. To the basics. Canada. 1 Canada Street.
I don't know.
Okay. The first person to call in with the answer wins.
Toronto.
That's what I was thinking. Shout out, Brittany.
Our friend who lives in Toronto is distantly related to David Cronenberg.
I need to know what the exact connection is. But
Yeah.
we do have
We'll ask her.
how many were removed closely.
So, Candy finds her grandma's body and sees the creature, which we talked about. A police officer tells Frank that they found the body and that Candy was found upstairs sleeping in this deep trauma sleep. This curly-haired psychologist at the police station tells Frank that he thinks Candy is traumatized by the incident, no shit, and that Candy doesn't remember anything. He says Frank should encourage her to remember, and Frank is like, why should I get her to remember if she doesn't remember it? So I wanted to talk about we talked about this a little bit already.
Yeah.
Like, Frank is a character. Like, he's so just kind of emotionless. And I think, David Cronenberg is roasting himself a little bit too, because Frank is so out of touch
Right.
with his emotions and how to process any kind of deep trauma.
But it's like kind of like, it's like things are just happening and Frank is there.
Yeah.
To like witness. It's like he has no real control or anything over what's happening, and he's just like a witness to it, but doesn't like, but with a certain sense of apathy, like doesn't further, like we said earlier, like invest time in spending time with Candy, or doesn't further like try to get his ex-wife out of the program. Like he is just like there to witness.
He's like given up on Nola.
Yeah,
he's just worried about Candy at this point. He thinks Nola.
But, like, is he?
Right. Is he really? Yeah. So Nola tries to call Frank, but Chris the twink takes the phone away and says she's in isolation. Nola says that Frank thinks she's turning into her mother and is trying to make Candy into baby Nola. Interesting. And Hal role plays with Nola as Nola's daddy. Nola cries about how her dad didn't protect her from her mother's abuse. So we learn more about that family situation.
Yeah.
And
which is sort of like the same thing that's happening with Frank. Like, he's not protecting his daughter from the mother's abuse.
Yeah,
so it's
or he's trying to, but he's
Yeah.
not really, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, like
He doesn't talk to his kid
Yeah.
about it or anything.
Yeah.
Like,
There's this like awkward scene early on, and before he goes to the lawyer and he's photographing the bruises on Candy's back.
it's actually the next scene where Frank is taking photos of her back.
Yeah.
It's very creepy.
Yeah. Well, we can get into that.
Well, I just have the note here that it's very creepy.
But it's like, I think it's creepy because of the level of engagement. She's like standing in this window, I think like combing a doll's hair or something, and he is, and like her
dress is down off her
her
shoulders.
dress is down off her shoulders, like folded down, and it's like very like beautiful, like angelic child in this like a little bit like fetishy kind of way.
Yeah.
And then he's really like disengaged with her, and he's like photographing her to
While she's playing. Yeah.
photographing these like bruises. And it is this like awkward like I just feels like this like disconnect.
It's very much like Hal and Frank treat these girls and women like subjects of something.
Yeah, of the great experiment called life.
Yeah, of the great experiment called life. So Frank picks Nola's father, Barton, up from the airport, who's like an old drunk.
Yeah.
And Candy is in a red snowsuit that looks like what the creatures are wearing.
Yeah.
So it's very visually linked.
Yeah.
Frank visits a man named Jan Hartog, a former patient of Dr. Raglan. Oh my God. And Hartog is quite a character.
Who's he played by?
Good question. Let's look.
Because it's a very memorable performance.
He's very good. I think he's also in Scanners, also as a crazy person. Robert A. Silverman. Mm-hmm. As, Jan Hartog.
Well done.
Yeah. He's also really good in this. He is a very bitter former patient of Dr. Raglan. He's got this hideous growth on his neck caused by a form of lymphatic cancer that he believes was induced by Raglan during psychoplasmic sessions. And we just want to touch that big old growth.
Yeah. I mean, there's just this little teaser of like Cronenberg grossness.
Yeah.
And it's like a flash, like this man is walking around the hospital room.
He's got
with
this like big wrap around his neck.
Yeah,
so
like a towel.
To hide it. Yeah.
And he's also like sweating a lot.
He's sweating a lot and his voice. It's
and they
just so
like,
gross.
and then there's just this moment where he gives like a little, like he opens up his collar and like the towel and just gives you this like quick flash of his like chin growth.
Yeah.
And like it's just like
sweaty and wrinkly.
Oh my God.
You just want to touch it.
You just want to touch it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's just us, but
I mean,
I just want to.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Cronenberg too. Probably.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cronenberg's like gross out shit. I always just want to touch it.
Yeah. But then
Let me touch that growth.
But another physical manifestation of
Trauma.
Trauma.
Yes. Does that even happen when you have lymphatic cancer?
No, I mean, that's internal. I would think. I mean, like, I've never.
Yeah, but there's these I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
I felt like that was like that was just like the plasmics.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I always felt.
Okay. Yeah. It's just the plasmics.
I don't even, I mean, I'm saying that wrong every time. Just the plasmics. That's just some of the plasmics.
Frank leaves disturbed. Barton goes to Soma Free to see Nola. He's drinking in his car. But Raglan turns him away. He hasn't told Nola that her mother is dead, and he says he's not going to because it will disrupt her therapy. And Barton is very upset about this. This was an interesting scene because I felt like both of these men are so toxic to Nola. Mm-hmm. Like, Raglan is sort of protecting her from somebody he knows is toxic to her, but he's not much better.
Yeah.
Like, hiding her mother's death from her is terrible.
It's just another person. It's like now the manipulation is becoming like is becoming like a greater, like he's like protecting her for the experiment. Yeah. Not as a human anymore now that this like human issue has like arisen. Right.
Frank invites Candace's teacher, Ruth Mayer, 70s babe.
Oh my God, hell yeah.
Home for dinner to discuss his daughter's performance at school.
Yeah, he did.
And at dinner, Ruth says Candy needs mothering.
Oh my God, so sexy.
He says he got involved. This is when I was like, oh, this is what he really fucking thinks of his wife. He got involved with a woman who married him for his sanity, hoping it would rub off. That's what he says to Ruth.
Oh, it's so rude.
And Ruth is like, you're an asshole.
Yeah. She's like, that crazy bitch is the most interesting thing about you. Yeah.
And that is such a terrible thing to say.
Yeah.
To a stranger. Barton interrupts with a drunken phone call from Juliana's home, demanding that they both go to Soma Free to see Nola. Frank leaves to console Barton, leaving Candace in Ruth's care. Again, pawning her off on another woman.
Yeah.
He leaves her this book. He's like, here, read this. He's like such an asshole in this scene. He leaves her this book called The Shape of Rage. Is that Hal's book? I don't know. It's not clear.
I'm sure that's probably Hal's.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to assume. At his old house, Barton wanders around drunk and depressed. He traces his wife's ex-body outline on the floor.
Oh my God, which was so great because like nobody knew how to do any curves and tape, so it's very like boxy, kind of like a Lego.
Yes. And suddenly a creature creeps out from under one of the beds and attacks Barton, and it's this deformed childlike creature that looks like a monstrous version of Candy. Meanwhile, Frank arrives to find Barton murdered by the same deformed creature who dies after attempting to kill Frank. The detective tells him that he thinks that Juliana the grandma had a deformed child locked up in the attic that was up there the whole time, and that's what murdered her. Okay. That's... They write that off way too quickly. They're like, yeah, deformed kid in the attic.
Wait, whose deformed kid is this?
They think the grandma had this deformed child locked up in the house, and that's who killed her, and like also killed Barton. Because the creature dies. Yeah. So they take it to be autopsy.
Yeah. No. I just like, I didn't. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what they think. That's who they think the creature is.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, probably. Like, they probably just had some kid in the attic for years, which they, like, fed fish heads to. Yeah. And, like, it finally lost its mind. Yeah. That makes sense. I have one in my attic. I'm so excited to release it.
Yeah, that's their go-to theory. That's their working theory at this point. So that's the other thing, too, is, like, how demonized the women are, too, in this movie. It's like, oh, she probably had this deformed kid in the attic.
Yeah, it's her own fault that she was murdered.
Right, exactly. So while he is away, Ruth answers a phone call from Nola, who, recognizing her voice and believing her to be carrying on an affair with Frank, insults her and angrily warns her to stay away from her family. She's nuts on the phone. It's very funny. She's like, get the fuck away from my family. Such good acting.
That is a really good phone call.
Yeah, and Ruth is very disturbed.
Yeah, she whips out a cigarette.
The police autopsy the creature child and reveal a multitude of bizarre anatomical anomalies.
Oh my God, did you write some of them down?
Mm-hmm. The creature is asexual, like not not identity-wise, but like doesn't have any sexual organs, is supposedly colorblind, naturally toothless, and has a beak-like gum situation.
God, I love a good beak gum.
Devoid of a navel.
Yeah.
Indicating that there's no known means of natural human birth.
Yeah.
And the scene also takes place in this like hot pink lighting in the morgue.
Yeah. So you can't like really see the body at all.
Yeah.
Because it's dark.
Yeah. And the doctor doing the autopsy also explains that there's like a sack of gas in between the creature's shoulder blades or something, which is like how it lives. I don't know. It doesn't make any
shoulder
sense.
sack?
The thing that is so funny about the little documentary we watched is this man was like, Cronenberg is like part director, part scientist, like he's got a lot of science in his films. And it's like, you mean made up science? Like it's sci-fi. Like he's not a scientist. I don't know. I just think it's so funny how men get to be like, he's an artist, but he's also a scientist. Like
he's a genius.
He is a genius. He's an artistic genius, but he made up the science.
It's completely made up.
It's not probable.
But like, what were they saying about that stink sack?
That's what like keeps the creature going, and it like deflated when it died or something.
Oh, is that how you kill it?
I guess. I don't know.
Science. I need to see the science behind this.
Yeah. Right. So Nola role plays with Raglan again, with Raglan as Ruth Mayer. Mm-hmm. And she insists that her and Frank could be happy again if she would just go away. If Ruth would just go away.
Yeah.
So we know that that's probably the next person to die.
Yeah.
So... I mean, and she's so possessive, Nola, and like Frank clearly does not care about her or love her anymore. And we just see that she's like this crazy, castrating woman. Yeah. So Barbara with a phone. So Barbara Creed wrote this book called The Monstrous Feminine. Have you read it? Maybe parts of it.
I've read parts of it. Yeah.
It's very, very good. And she talks a lot about this film, and basically, like the figure. So her whole thing is like modern psychology. Freud has told us that men are afraid of women because they are like castrated men. Mm-hmm. And that women have like penis envy, or women with vaginas have penis envy, whatever. Right. So, but Barbara Creed says that actually men are not afraid of women because they're castrated. They're afraid of cis women because they are castrating. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of her theory about this film, is like Nola is this castrating, monstrous figure. Mm-hmm. And as we'll see, we'll talk more about that at the end with the big reveal. So Frank finally gets the fuck home. How long has he been gone? And Ruth dodges and tells him to fuck off, basically. And is like, yeah, she's like, your life is too complicated for me right now. Bye. Yeah, she's like, I got a call from your crazy wife. I am leaving. So I've been here for hours. Frank comforts Candy, who's obviously extremely traumatized, and tells her that the creature is dead. She can relax.
Chill out.
And she cries in his arms. It's very sad.
Aww.
After the murder story reaches the newspapers, Raglan reluctantly acknowledges that the murders coincide with his sessions with Nola, relating to their respective topics that they talk about. So, like, each person dies whenever she talks about them. He closes Soma free and sends his patients to municipal care, with the exception of Nola.
Of course.
His
prized piece.
Michael, the patient from the beginning, obviously doesn't want to leave.
No.
He's super regressed, Michael. And I have to wonder if he's always been like this.
Daddy.
Or if Hal has just completely made him regress. Because honestly, it seems like Hal makes people more unwell. Like, Nola is so unwell at this point.
It's like, we don't know if the therapy works.
Yeah.
We just know that it does something.
Right. Yes, exactly.
It gets results, but are they good results?
To what end? just as an aside, that Woody Allen's memoir is like not being published because Hachette Publishing, the workers, walked out and refused to publish it.
That's amazing.
Which is great. And Stephen King, being the old coot he is, on Twitter was like, I just worry about censorship. And people were like, it's not censorship to say, like, we don't want to pay for your book.
Stephen King.
I know. And then fucking Joyce Carol Oates retweeted something and was like, yes, the protests worked, but to what end? Like, okay, JCO, you really thought you were saying something very profound there. I just keep thinking about that.
Freedom of speech.
But to what end? Like, she thought she was being so provocative.
It's all going to shit when you can't let a fucking criminal post about his rape. I mean, like,
it's ridiculous. That's not censorship. Anyway, so Frank is alerted of the closure of Soma Free by Jan Hartog, our friend with the neck growth. And Michael is now staying in the same building as Hartog. And Frank, and he introduces Frank to Michael. And Michael is so good in this movie. We should actually look up who the actor is. Gary McKeehan. He's very good in this role. He has this great part in this scene where he's talking about how Nola is Raglan's queen bee.
Yeah.
She was born to prove that psychoplasmics is the ultimate therapeutic device. And he's whining about his daddy issues. He begs, this is so interesting, he begs Frank to be his daddy. I'll make a deal with you. Just be my daddy. I'll bleed for you. Which is so fucking kinky.
Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, it is hot. Yeah, be my daddy. I'll bleed for you.
Yeah.
He says he knows I am addicted to him and he doesn't care. Am I just a pervert or is this extremely gay?
No, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there,
It's really gay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Oliver Reed, I guess, Hal Raglan is a manipulative bisexual icon.
But it's also very like the boys have daddy issues and the girls have mommy issues. It's very gendered.
It is very gendered, yeah. But Nola also has daddy issues.
She does have daddy.
Yeah.
I mean,
but her main issue is with her mother.
But they're still based around her mother.
Yes, yeah.
Like, her father never beat her. She was just mad that her father didn't protect her from her mother's beatings, but it was still centered around, yeah.
And it's also a commentary on modern psychology, too, where he's like, he knows I'm addicted to him. It's like,
yeah,
how are you going to be able to do this treatment without Dr. Raglan? Like, you
Right.
can't.
Right.
He's the one who does it. He's the one person who does it.
Yeah.
So Michael is now covered in lesions after his outburst. He can't. The other thing about the psychoplasmics thing is it seems that once it's unleashed, people can't control it. Like, it just starts happening whenever they get upset. It's psychologically activated. So, right, is that actually working? Like, just because you're making somebody's trauma manifest physically, does that mean it's actually helping them?
Do you have any physical manifestations that happen when you get really upset?
Yes, I have a pimple that forms on my face. No, I'm dead ass. Yeah, like, I have one of my... I have a pimple that forms on my forehead. My abusive ex used to tell me that when we were having a fight, it would just form.
Oh my God.
Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, like a hemorrhoid.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
I mean...
But just that's
No, but for real though, we underestimate how much... I love that you're on my podcast talking about your hemorrhoids.
I know. I was like, I could just be real and talk about people do not talk about their hemorrhoid issues enough. It's
I
real.
get hemorrhoids when I'm stressed.
Fucking stressed out.
I think everybody gets stuff like that and we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And we have compartmentalized so successfully as a Western society that your mental issues are separate from your physical issues, but it's all intertwined so intimately. Yeah. I can barely function when I'm stressed.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can will away.
Yeah.
Your body just does it.
Yeah.
Your body is smarter than you. and it knows what it has to do to
it's
stay
some
alive.
type of it's like all about survival.
Exactly.
It's like, for whatever reason, when I'm stressed and anxious, like my stomach hurts, and that like affects my digestion, which affects like my roids, my hemorrhoids,
My roids.
and then I get my roid rage.
Well, it's kind of like how diets don't work because your body doesn't know what a diet is.
Yeah.
It just knows that you're starving.
Right.
So it doesn't know like, oh, I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm dieting. Like, it just thinks you're starving.
Yeah.
It's a very primal thing.
Yeah.
Like, your body is a lot smarter than you.
I really like this episode and like this like diving into like sharing about mental health.
Well, that's what I'm trying to cultivate here.
Because it is really like what this movie is about too.
Yeah.
Like and this perception of mental health.
Yes, and I don't actually even know what the movie is trying to say about mental health exactly. I just know that it explores a lot of interesting things related to how these things manifest physically.
I also feel like Cronenberg probably went to some like couples therapy and was like totally thinking about something else, like making this film during couples therapy.
They were in couples therapy, and he was like, what if somebody had a ball sack-like growth on their neck?
Anything's more interesting than this.
But, I mean, it's kind of an indictment of therapy in a way. But also kind of a progressive view of therapy in acknowledging that mental stress can manifest physically. Mm-hmm. It's all there's a lot here.
There's so much here.
Yeah, there really is. And feel free to continue to talk about our mental health issues. I don't mind doing that.
Oh, yeah, me neither. I'm an open book, baby.
Yeah. But yeah, I totally have like physical things that manifest when I am having like a lot of trauma.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like a way of like you're alerting yourself to know that there's something up that maybe you should like address as well.
Yeah. Psychoplasmics, baby.
Psychoplasmics. Let's start our own Psychoplasmics Institute.
So, cut to Raglan, 70s hunk in a beige coat with fur trim. Yes, bitch, is my note. He has great outfits. Yeah, he really looks like such a hunk in the next scenes. When Candace returns to school, these two creature children attack and kill Ruth in front of her class and abscond with Candace to Soma Free. The way that the kids kill is so full of rage, and the kids' reactions to the teacher being murdered in front of them are so funny. And like, it's funny because it's so fucked up. Like, the kids are just horrified. Like, I mean, I think this whole movie is just about trauma, right? Like, the kids are so obviously traumatized by this. Frank finds her body, and it is brutal. Like, he bursts into the classroom. Her body is, like, completely destroyed. Yeah. She's dead as fuck. And the kids are all sobbing.
Did any of the kids try to help her?
They didn't. Well, one kid runs out of the building and is like, she fell down.
Yeah.
So there's one hero child.
Yeah, that just does something where all the other kids are just like
in shock. Yeah. Which would be me.
Yeah.
I would be like,
They're like, damn, where'd those creatures get those snowsuits?
Cute snowsuits. So Hal wakes Nola up, and he's wearing a chunky white turtleneck. Skin tight, chunky white turtleneck that I'm obsessed with. And Nola is on this like red bed, and she's got this angelic white diaphanous getup that is so iconic to this film.
Yeah.
And Nola tells Hal that she doesn't feel threatened by Ruth anymore. And Hal is
interesting,
disturbed because he knows that people have been dying.
Yeah, he knows what happened.
Yeah, exactly. They go to Nola's apartment, Frank and the cops, to search for Candace, where her and Candace lived before she went to Soma Free. And Frank has this line about, this is where she was for 9 months before she went to the Institute, which I feel like it's part of David Cronenberg's issues.
Yeah. And he also said that it's the first time he'd ever been there.
Yeah.
So he'd never been in his ex-wife's apartment, which must have been, The creatures lead Candace by the hands through the snow
to Nola. Frank is bereft back at home. Mike shows up, babbling about people following him, and Frank demands information on why Soma Free is closed, and Mike tells him that Raglan is onto a breakthrough with the disturbed kids in the work shed that Nola is taking care of. Ooh. And Frank runs out of the house on his way to Soma Free. Frank sneaks up on Hal by the shed and demands to know where Candace is. And Hal very kind of calmly, this is when Hal's character starts to pivot.
Yeah.
Where he's like taken a turn, like a what hath I wrought sort of
the
turn.
Moment of introspection.
Yeah, where he's like now trying to help Frank.
Yeah. I mean, the murder of the school teacher, you know.
Yeah, he was like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Which makes me feel like he is a villain, but not.
Right.
Like, he does, in the end, he realizes that he's wrong.
Yeah. Which was nice, you know.
Yeah. And he tells Frank to stay calm because when they confront Nola, he has to not show her that he's disgusted because she's dangerous.
Yeah.
And we still don't know exactly why yet.
Yeah.
And that Hal is going to grab Candace while Frank distracts Nola. It should have gone the other way around.
Yeah.
Because Hal knows how to talk to Nola, right? Like,
yeah. Was it about engaging with like the creatures? Like he thought he'd be better with the creatures?
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, like, but also I really like the idea of be like, you're going to see someone just like, don't look disgusted.
Which is interesting. I don't know. It just sort of reminds me of like visiting people in psychiatric institutions.
Yeah.
And like, they don't really, I mean, in my experience, they don't super prep you for what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
For me, okay, because I've seen some shit.
Yeah.
But for some other people, you should probably be prepped. Or how, I'm laughing, guys, because like I've actually experienced this shit. But like, if you don't have any relationship to this stuff, you shouldn't joke about it.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking of like how like, I don't know, there's no like normalization of like somebody who is in like any type of care. It's like all of a sudden they become this like freak, like don't look directly at it. Like, It's like, why aren't, maybe if we like became more empathetic and like normalized these things, like somebody who is like ill, which is like all we know at this point, you know?
Right.
Instead of like, so you're already prepping us with this psychology of like what is behind the door, what is in the hospital room, what is in this.
Right.
Like,
well, people are so, I talk about this sometimes on the social media. Mm-hmm. We've normalized jokes about like being depressed and anxious because everybody at this point has generalized depression and anxiety, but there are still so many mental illnesses that are so stigmatized,
right,
as you and I know, very intimately. And as for me, as somebody who has loved and been involved familially and romantically with multiple people with serious mental illnesses that are completely stigmatized by our culture.
Yeah.
Like, we all make jokes on the internet about like, oh, I want to kill myself. But it wasn't until, honestly, I personally experienced a psychotic episode that I understood like how deeply that shit goes and like how truly alienating having a stigmatized mental illnesses. Right.
100%.
And people are so scared of people with serious mental illnesses. And it's like, I historically have not been, just because that's who I am as a person, but I've seen it.
Yeah.
Like, people just not knowing how to talk to people who are that mentally ill.
And it's like also like this idea of putting someone in the category of the other.
Yeah.
Like you have no, like this person is different and there's nothing relatable about this person, instead of like approaching something in like we always have more in common with each other. than differences. And
It's true.
it doesn't matter what ilk you come from.
Well, it's also scary because it's to people because it's abject.
Yes.
Sort of like how people with disabilities or people who are fat are abject to people because it reminds them of their own mortality and of the limits of their own body.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing with people who are really mentally ill. Like, it's scary to people because I think a lot of us feel like we're a hair's breadth away from insanity at any point. And then those of us who don't feel like that are scared of it just because they don't know they're ignorant.
Right.
And they don't know how to relate to people.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is the harm
Yeah.
of, like, if somebody is experiencing delusions, whether they're hallucinations or they're delusions about how everybody's out to get you, it's real to them.
Right.
So you don't need to believe that it's happening. You just need to believe that it's happening to them.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, this just kind of these men have no idea.
Yeah.
Except
yes.
Hal knows, but like Frank has no idea how to talk
Yeah.
to his wife.
No, he has no clue how to talk to her. And Hal is not prepping him.
Yeah. He's just like, don't be disgusted.
Now go.
So Frank confronts Nola while Hal tries to find and rescue Candace, and he tells her that he loves her and she's the only woman for him, and she's
Oh my God.
obviously not buying it.
Yeah.
And
Because all women know that's bullshit.
yeah, and Nola tells Frank what is happening to her is too strange for her old life. And Frank,
Agreed.
Right, Frank implores her, saying he wants to go on this journey with her, and she's like, "So, you're ready to see me, Frank?" She iconically opens these white robes to reveal these hideous sacs forming all over her body, which we learned were made with condoms.
Oh my God.
And the sacs contain her rage babies, like these physical manifestations of her rage. And she's giving birth to them on the outside of her body.
Rage baby life hack. It's just condoms.
Beauty hack. So Barbara Creed in The Monstrous Feminine talks about like how the rage babies Nola is creating.
Yeah.
Like physical manifestations of herself.
Right.
And killing people with them, and how afraid the men are in the film of this. I mean, she's just a monster. Like, she's just this castrating monster woman who, and the process of birth is so terrifying and gross and scary to everybody, but especially to cis men. I think it's just like having it be on the outside of the body as opposed to like all the gross and horrifying things that happen inside the body is just like this like turning inside out. Like, we get to see how scary and horrible David Cronenberg thinks birth is.
Yeah. And to also see to her, like, get to this, like, point in her therapy where you're, like, seeing her give birth, but it's, like, she really, like, looks like some type of, like, goddess.
She does. I think she looks incredible.
Yeah, it's like amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you could build, like, a statue and, like, worship it with, like, her holding up her robe and having these, like, sacks there. And then you think about, like, the manipulation of men that men have had on her life to get her to this next, like, so extra, like, next level point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She tears open one of the sacks with her teeth.
Yeah.
And this fetus comes out and she starts licking it like in this primal way, like an animal, like cleaning its young. And that was Samantha Egger's suggestion.
Oh my God. It was like her fucking dream come true.
Yeah.
She just was like, yeah.
And she said that when Cronenberg screened the film to like all the male producers, that they were like horrified that like some of them had to leave to go throw up.
Yeah.
Which is so funny to me.
Yeah. Like, that's what disgusts men the most.
Yeah.
It's just like a woman's body.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I also noticed that was like, there's no breasts.
No, it's just condom sacks.
At all, just condom sacks. Like, she's completely besides the like uterus growing, like there's no breastfeeding, there's no like titty bounce. There's just like, which I think is kind of like like the removal of that is interesting.
Yeah. And then she just drops the robe.
Yeah.
So iconic.
Yeah.
Such an amazing scene. This is the scene that's in 100 Scariest Movie Moments.
Yeah. And she loved that character. You can tell. Like, she was just
you could
like,
tell.
she's like in it.
Yeah. Nola is upset that Frank is horrified because he's like, oh God, Nola. And
she's like, I disgust you.
She's like, oh no, I disgust you. You hate me.
Which is something I say, like, probably, like, in every relationship, to be honest.
I disgust you.
Every time I lick my child.
Every time I lick the blood off. Every time you lick cream puff.
That's just how she prefers it. I disgust
you. So Nola is upset that Frank is horrified, which activates the rage babies who attack Hal. And Hal, in a moment of clarity, like knowing that he's caused all of this, sacrifices himself.
Oh my God.
To save Candy.
Just like such a hero.
Yes.
Like I can't get over what a hero he is.
Love him.
But this is my favorite fun fact of production.
Please tell us. Yeah.
Okay, so Hal, who's attacked by all this like army of like rage children, they were actually all played by a local young girls gymnastic troupe. And they said in the documentary that their parents were actually like on set, like taking their little like gymnastic child and like chucking them at Hal, who was like fighting them off in this like pretty like violent scene with all of these like tiny little
he said he was like banging the children against his body.
Just like covered in little girls.
Yeah. Like acting like they were hurting him.
So bizarre.
And then they put the sound effects over it.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's just like movie magic at its best.
It really
is. It's like,
is.
you know that like without like the editing and just like the raw footage of that scene must have been like
classic.
So hilarious to film.
So good. So Nola screams that she'd rather kill Candy than let Frank take her. So she's become this toxic mother.
Yeah.
This toxic smothering mother.
Yeah. The ultimate evil.
Yeah. And the rage babies start to attack Candy. And Frank demands that Nola stop the rage babies and tries to choke her. And she says, laughing, kill me, kill me.
Mm-hmm. Do it, baby.
And then Frank strangles and kills Nola.
Yeah.
Very disturbing. I honestly find this to be an indictment of men.
Yeah.
Like, in a way. I think the movie is very misogynist. And when I say that, I don't say it in the typical, like, identity sort of politics way that we talk about it. Like, I think I love this movie.
Right.
Like, I think that the movie is both misogynist and an indictment of misogyny.
Right.
And I find that to be very interesting.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, like we were just saying, I mean, there's just like a lot to like peel back and kind of like think about in all these different ways. But like, you know, ultimately, like, he has to kill her. Like, there is no other way to deal with this situation. There's no other possible way he could possibly deal with this situation.
Yeah.
Besides killing her.
Yeah, and or that's what he feels like is the way to deal with it. And I mean, I think it's also telling because that is a really common way that men kill their female partners is by strangling them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's just it's upsetting. It's
and it's also like legitimized.
Yes,
you're like, he has nothing else. Like, there's no, like, he couldn't have roofied her, and maybe like the rage babies could have like gotten knocked out for a little while. I mean, there's just like I'm
not rooting for either of them.
I mean,
but I don't know if that's just me.
I think thinking about this idea of like the justification of him like murdering her,
right, which is super misogynist.
Yeah. And sort of like in a way like going back to like thinking about Cronenberg's own like special journey, like the justification of like this woman joining this cult and like it has nothing to do with her mental health. It has to do with like saving the child, and
Right.
like which is like essentially like his offspring, like it's his. So there's like, I mean, like, and I don't know, obviously, like Cronenberg makes up science. We make up facts about Cronenberg. I don't know, like, what was going on in his personal life. But, like, you do see this is all kind of legitimized by how horrible Nola was. Like,
Yeah.
what a monster she was.
Yeah.
Is this whole story.
Yeah. Absolutely. Monstrous feminine. Frank finds all this carnage. All the rage babies are dead, as well as Hal. Mm-hmm. And he finds Candy alive.
Mm-hmm. Somehow.
Somehow. What vestiges of her sanity are left.
Yeah.
And Frank carries a visibly traumatized Candy back to his car, and the two depart. And as they sit in silence, these two small lesions appear on Candace's arm.
Yeah.
So the cycle continues.
The cycle continues.
So was Nola always having psychoplasmic manifestations? Was her mother beating her? It's all so vague. Like how is Candy developing these lesions without Hal bringing them forth? It's like that's just always been in these women.
Yeah.
It's like passed down trauma.
It's
passing down trauma.
It's passing down trauma. That's what I was thinking. And like this idea of like even like reflecting back to the earlier picture of Nola in the hospital as a child. She has the same like blonde hair and bangs. She looks exactly like the child. So it's like they are the same.
Yeah.
And this idea that like he will never escape the trauma that this woman put on his child.
Yeah.
And that it will always be there. I was also thinking about that medical bill. That, like, Sonoma, like...
Sonoma William Sonoma.
That William Sonoma medical bill. Private institution, mental health care.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
are they rich? Like, what?
Anyway. Yeah, how do you feel about that ending? Dun,
I mean,
dun.
I find it very profound, like how Candy is now taking on her mother's trauma, but I also find it incredibly misogynist.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's a lot going on. A lot going on in this movie.
A lot going on.
So, any closing thoughts about The Brood?
Do you think you can make The Brood today?
No. They were saying in the documentary, they were like, you can never make it now. But I don't think that's true, maybe. Marriage Story was the same shit. Like, he went through a divorce. He made a misogynist movie about it.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I couldn't watch it.
I could barely get through it.
It's just like Scarlett Johansson's haircut is just like the opposite of Ruth's haircut in like Ruth's school teacher's cool mullet is nothing like anyway. No, I was thinking about that. We were like joking about like remakes of these old films because everyone needs to recycle things, and like there's just like also like an evil child genre of film too, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I just don't think that we're that interested in that stuff as a culture right now.
Right.
I think everything now is about like end times and pandemics.
Yeah.
And in the sci-fi genre, that is.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of space for things like this at the moment.
But I do highly recommend it. I think like actually like picking it apart and thinking about all like the idea of like what the perceptions of mental health and control and like power dynamics and ex-wives,
Yeah.
chin growths,
Chin growths.
gills.
skills. There's just not a lot of good body horror these days.
Yeah. I think it like also goes back to like just like really loving this body horror.
Yeah, I love body horror.
It's like if this aesthetically, I mean like going like the aesthetics of this movie.
Yes. I'm always like, I was searching for something like this movie. I'm always like, I want to watch something like The Brood.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Or like the first time you watched The Brood when you were like, whoa, what did I just say?
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
knew it was like special, like that experience.
Yeah, it's a special movie. So Liz,
yeah,
where can people find you on social media?
Oh my God, my Instagram is at Otizil, which is my name backwards. So at otiz.zil. And yeah, I am like posting a lot of like, I also post a lot about like horror movies and like cinema that I am interested in, and all types of art things, and yeah. Follow me.
Follow Liz.
Into the apocalypse.
We're still going to be talking about movies.
I know.
What else is there to do? And you know where to find me, Instagram and Twitter, Girls Guts Giallo. You can follow me on Patreon and get bonus content at patreon.com/girlsgutsgiallo. And we'll see y'all next week.
See y'all. Thanks, Annie.
Thank you.